Well, G7 leaders are meeting in Western Canada tonight for a summit that's likely to be dominated by discussions around the conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine, as well as the trade war unleashed by one of their own, US President Donald Trump.
Now, G7 leaders are expected to engage on the global economic outlook, where the issue of unilateral tariffs are expected to be ventilated.
President Cyril Ramaphosa is among those attending the G7 outreach session, which will happen tomorrow. The focus there will be on energy security.
And let's look at a snapshot from different leaders on the priorities ahead.
I want to thank you for the continued wonderful bilateral relations between Canada and South Africa. We've had a long relationship, and we're very proud of the way that we deal with each other. We support you with fires, you support us with investment, and you supported our just energy transition, and we're really delighted. So our relations are strong, and we're particularly pleased to be here.
I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu today. I reiterated Europe's commitment to peace and stability in the Middle East. In this context, Israel has the right to defend itself. Iran is the principal source of regional instability, and we've always been very clear: Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. We have voiced our strong concerns over Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile program. A diplomatic solution remains the best way in the long run to address concerns about Iran's nuclear program. And Europe remains committed to finding a lasting solution through a negotiated deal.
Mr. President, can you give us a sense of what you're doing to try to de-escalate the situation between Iran and Israel?
Well, I hope there's going to be a deal. I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens. But sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
One of the questions that I will discuss with President Trump during the meeting is the defense package that Ukraine is ready to buy. We will discuss it with him. I'm sure that we will have such a chance. Well, at least I count on it. We will discuss with G7 leaders Russian frozen assets. We will also discuss sanctions. We need price caps for energy resources, for the Russian oil in particular. We very much need it. And in general, there's a question: how long will partners give Russia opportunities?
Let's get you more on the G7 meeting. Bring in our US correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who's monitoring developments. Sherwin, good to see you. So let's run through the key issues going into the summit and perhaps look at how likely it is that they might be overshadowed, especially by what's going on in the Middle East, Israel and Iran at war.
So, Tembakile, you make a good point. There is the official program, right? And then there's also the unofficial program. A number of bilaterals will be taking place around the official program, around the official tete-a-tete. So let's give you that. Some of the key focus areas that the Canadian presidency of the G7 has put on this agenda is, one, protecting our communities around the world. So part of that is conversations around promoting international peace and security, countering foreign interference, with a focus on transnational repression, fighting transnational crime. That list goes on. Then this next subsection is building energy security and accelerating the digital transition. That energy security focus is very much part of the outreach element that President Ramaphosa and a number of invited leaders will participate in tomorrow. And then the third subsection is securing partnerships for the future. Let me read you what it says here. Long-term security and prosperity depend on building coalitions with reliable partners, Tembakile, through mutual respect. The G7 will work on attracting private investment to build the infrastructure of the future, creating higher paying jobs for citizens, opening dynamic global markets where business can compete. So two very key areas there will be dealing with the global economy, the issue of tariffs in the main, the issue of artificial intelligence, the issue of securing rare mineral supply chains, which is a big talking point these days. And then the other big element is energy security. But overshadowing all of that, right, are the geopolitical concerns. In the main, what you're seeing developing in the Middle East, in the main, what you're seeing continuing in places like Ukraine and Sudan, arresting these geopolitical, these intractable conflicts, these new burgeoning conflicts will be a key issue here in terms of getting some sort of consensus on the pathway forward, how to stop the ballistic missiles and the airstrikes that are now being exchanged between Iran and Israel, and of course continued concerns about instability in Gaza, instability in the West Bank, Ukraine, Sudan and the like. So a lot on the table here for G7 leaders, for some of the additional leaders here, but certainly some difficult areas where they are going to struggle to find consensus moving forward. And I also have a clip before I get back to you from Professor Robert Hubert. He's a political science professor at the University of Calgary. This is how he summed up what this summit is going to look like. Let's watch.
The first major issue is how do you respond to the economic crisis that is created by one of its own members within the G7. We have always seen the G7 responding to outside economic pressures and crises. The crisis that we are in now is being caused by the Americans with the tariffs. The changing nature of warfare and the overall international security environment is changing, as we've seen with the success of both the Ukrainian and the Israeli attacks. The third issue, and this is the one that will be totally background but is occurring, we're in the midst of a massive transformation of our nuclear deterrent system that has guaranteed the peace of the major powers since the late 1950s. What we're seeing is development of weapon delivery systems and modernization of nuclear warheads and other supporting systems that may be, in fact, changing this whole concept that we only have nuclear weapons to deter, we don't have them to fight. Some of the statements coming out from the Russians suggest that they are rethinking that, and as a result, we see the Americans readjusting their policy, which may be taking them in a very different direction.
So, Thembekile, complex issues that even G7 countries are going to struggle to find consensus on. And what we are hearing from our colleague Nick Harper, who is on the ground in Kananaskis in Western Canada, is that there will be no joint communique at the conclusion of the summit, which tells you that disagreement is probably going to be the order of the day.
And speaking of disagreement, Sherwin, just before we let you go, we're already expecting that to happen because the last time there was a similar meeting in Canada, a meeting of G7 leaders, Donald Trump was somewhat the elephant in the room, and you have to wonder how nervous the other leaders will be around the American president, given that there are still outstanding issues of trade and that even on the Middle East, there isn't consensus on Israel, Iran, Israel, Gaza, or even Ukraine and Russia.
Right, and the US president talking about how he sees a role as a mediator for Russia's president Vladimir Putin as it relates to the ongoing exchange you're now seeing between Iran and Israel. How does that play itself out among the other G7 leaders? How does that play itself out with the other leaders, among them President Ramaphosa, the leader of the UAE, the leader of Australia, and several others that will be in the room? I must just tell you, we heard from the presidency a little bit earlier today, just confirming to us who some of the bilaterals will be with in terms of Ramaphosa's meetings. He'll be meeting with Mexico's president, the German chancellor, a trilateral with the EU Council president and the EU Commission president, but no formal bilateral, Thembekile, confirmed with US President Donald Trump. This was sort of previewed by President Ramaphosa when he was in South Africa last week. The presidency clarifying that there was never a formal bilateral meeting planned with President Trump so soon after their White House meeting, but there might be a pull aside. This is a small meeting, a small gathering of leaders, so there will likely be an opportunity for them to have a formal tete-a-tete on the sidelines of their meetings in Western Canada.
Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, a US correspondent watching the G7 gathering. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Sherwin, this hour.